Maybe this company isn't as well known as Coca-Cola, but it has been around longer. On this episode of Antique Bottle Stories. There was a great famine in Ireland in the 1850s. As a result, a wave of Irish immigrants came to the United States, including Cornelius Crowley, who arrived in early 1852 in Massachusetts when he was about 17. Cornelius worked in the shoe industry as a teenager. He actually lost an eye due to dangerous conditions in the boot factory that he worked in. The story goes that a strap of leather was being worked in a machine close to his face. It snapped and it injured his eye. By the time he got to the hospital, it was too late to save his eye, and that's why this picture of him was taken at a profile to avoid photographing his eye injury. Cornelius and his wife had 9 kids. Our story actually starts with the oldest of Cornelius' sons, Dennis, who was born in 1863, and he worked as a boot crimper right alongside his dad at age 21. Yes, after his eye injury, Cornelius still continued to work at the boot factory. After Dennis worked at the boot factory, he married and he moved on to work as a bartender at a saloon. He was a big guy. He was 6 foot tall and he was solid. Legend says that Dennis actually was an amateur boxer for a while, so he was able to handle the bar brawls, which happened a lot back then. And so he needed to be like a bouncer to bartend there. Dennis and his wife had 5 sons. In 1901, Dennis started D.M. Crowley and Company, a liquor business. Some of Dennis's brothers-in-law worked at the company with him. They delivered liquor by horse carriage. One of his best sellers was Crowley's Ballbrook Straight Whiskey. Dennis eventually became known as Boss Crowley. Also in 1901, Dennis's dad, Cornelius, died. Apparently, Cornelius had lost his footing on a ladder in the basement of Dennis's liquor store. He fell and hit his head on the cement floor. His skull was crushed on impact. He was 67. Yeesh. Here's Dennis and Mary with their 5 boys. In 1905, C. Joseph, the oldest of Dennis's sons, became a clerk in the company. 5 years later, the second oldest son, Frank, also became a clerk. The business grew, and in 1916, Dennis had purchased a company that bottled seltzers and ginger ale and distributed liquors and mineral water that was owned by J. George Bieberbach. And a year later, the company was called Bieber Polar, with Edward Crowley serving as the president of the spring water division. And in that same year, Eugene was the president of the wholesale liquors, and Walter was a manager in that business. So all 5 of the boys were involved at this point. In 1918, Dennis continued to expand the business by purchasing the Leicester Polar Spring Company, which gave them access to pure spring water, which was of exceptional quality, and the combined business became known as the Bieber Polar Ginger Ale Company. By 1920, Dennis had retired from the day-to-day affairs of the business. It doesn't really say which one of the boys was in charge at this point. Soon after, the Prohibition started. This really put a hurt on the business because their most profitable products were the alcoholic ones. So they focused on their ginger ales and their spring water products. Then Dennis died in 1930 at age 67. When the Prohibition was over, Polar resumed selling the liquors again, but they stayed focused on the soft drinks. Among the first flavors produced were golden ginger ale and pale dry ginger ale. During World War II, Polar continued to operate with the help of sisters, wives, and mothers of employees. During this time, the 3rd generation of Crowleys are grown now. Ralph Crowley, Dennis's grandson, is now the president, and I can't find a picture of him. In 1966, the Polar Ginger Ale Company was renamed Polar Corporation to correct the impression that the company only produced ginger ale. One of the most significant events was in 1968 when Polar moved from the Beaverback location that it had been at for the last 50 years or so to its current location on Route 290 and built today's modern plant. They have this cool spot that you can drive up and get some fresh spring water. I thought that was pretty cool. So, you know the Coca-Cola polar bears, right? Well, Polar Beverages has a polar bear mascot named Orson, and he actually debuted 20 years before Coke's polar bears did. In 1902, Dennis Crowley chose a polar bear mascot so people would think that their drinks were cold and refreshing. Coke's polar bears didn't appear until 1922 and were only used here and there until 1993, when Coke kind of reinvented the bears and made lots of commercials, and they became very popular. Here's a clip of a 1993 commercial. Polar Beverages has a little sense of humor, and responding to Coke's new polar bears, Polar Beverages countered with a commercial showing Orson tossing a can of Coke into a recycle bin marked "Keep the Arctic Pure." Unfortunately, I can't find a clip of this commercial. Coke claimed that the ad could harm their image, and a judge ordered Polar to take the commercials down. Ralph remained chairman until his death in 1995. In 1992, the fourth generation of Crowleys took over, with Dennis's great-grandson, Ralph Crowley Jr., becoming president and CEO. Under his leadership, Polar made numerous acquisitions for the rights to manufacture and distribute national brands such as 7-Up, A&W, Sunkist, Seagram's, Royal Crown, and Diet Right. His brother Christopher became executive vice president and treasurer, which, as far as I know, they're both in that position today. Today, some other cousins have joined the company, and I think it's really cool that it's still family run to this day. Polar has now been in business for over 135 years, and they have all kinds of interesting combinations of flavors. My bottle is really nice. It's embossed with the words Polar Beverages and an embossed bear in the middle. It's got this embossed texture around it, and it's dated 1948 at the bottom. So this is a World War II era bottle. Dennis would not have still been around when this bottle was manufactured. And that's all I've got for today. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.